Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last Artist Honoring Women conversation. My name is Amanda Rawson, and I work with Art Builds Community. I'm going to start this conversation today with a land acknowledgement. We would like to begin this program by recognizing that while we gather in the Santa Clara County, we are gathered on the ethno-historic tribal territory of the Tamian Ohlone, which included the lands of the Poleños and who were related to the direct ancestors of the lineages enrolled in the Muecma Ohlone tribe, who were missionized in missions Santa Clara, San Jose, and San Francisco. The lands on which Santa Clara County are established was and continued to be of great significance to the Muecma Ohlone tribe of the San Francisco Bay Area. We also recognize that the ancestors of the Muecma Ohlone constructed and maintained the three Bay Area missions, Santa Clara, San Jose, and San Francisco. So for those of you who are new to our program, welcome, and we are excited to have you here. For those of you who are returning, you already know how we're going to move forward with this afternoon. So what is Womanhood is the first question. Womanhood is a public art and digital media project that will commission interactive, educational, and accessible artifacts and public artworks to promote the historical representation and recognition of women in Santa Clara County. So Artists Honoring Women. This is an artist talk series and program under the Project Womanhood, where we invite artists to speak and share on their experiences around creating public art, works of art, and recognition projects that honor the stories of women and their significant contributions, the community's historical places, and events. This project and program is made possible through the County of Santa Clara Office of Women's Policy. To find out more about the Womanhood Project, you can visit the project's website at www.womanhoodproject.org and sign up for emails to keep informed on what's coming next. So I'd like to introduce today's artist, Cheyenne Concepcion. Cheyenne is a multi-disciplinary artist and designer based in San Francisco. She creates work that examines the politics of place using installation, social practice, sculpture, and textile. Drawing on her interest in research and urban planning and utilizing her training as a designer, she works in a site-specific and focuses on land development, cultural memory, migration, and often has a public component. In 2020, Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, Cheyenne became the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts Fellow, and in 2019 was a Monument Lab Fellow and recipient of the Excellence in Design and Award from UC Berkeley. Go Bears. She is the co-founder and artistic director of New Monuments Task Force, a fantastical municipal agency engaged in the dialogue, development, and design of new monuments in California. Her work has been shown nationally in museums, galleries, and in situ. A self-taught artist, Concepcion received her master's in landscape architecture from UC Berkeley and bachelor's degree in urban studies and planning from UC San Diego. Welcome, Cheyenne. We're so excited to have you here.
It's this. I feel the same way. Thank you so much for having me. I feel very honored to even be in this lineup of badass women. So I'm feeling very lucky today and happy to talk about what I've learned this last couple of years with my work.
Great. So we're going to see a presentation from you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Can you see the? Oh, it'll come up, right? Okay, cool.
And really quick before we start, I just want to remind everybody who's watching on Facebook and YouTube, please feel free to send any comments or questions throughout Cheyenne's her presentation. We will have the opportunity to ask her these questions and have a conversation about them after her presentation. So.
All right. Yes, please. I'm excited for the conversation. And so my talk is titled "The Artist in the City," and it builds on recent ruminations I've been having about building my role as an artist in my city and what I've learned through directing the art project New Monuments Task Force. And I'm very excited to be here. So the story starts like this. It's February of 2020, and I'm beginning to plan my art installation for a transnational group exhibition called Shaping the Past. It's an initiative with Monument Lab and the Goethe Institute addressing what, whom, and how we remember in public spaces. So it's a group of public artists from around the world, and we were all planning to do these amazingly collaborative installations and projects in public spaces. And I was planning to exhibit my project, the Borderlands Archive. which is an independent archive tracing connection across territorial divide. It's an exploration of place, of cultural memory, of a highly misunderstood landscape between two countries. And it's a project I started in 2018. You could see we crop up as pop-up exhibitions and installations, and we also have a web platform showcasing all the artifacts that we've collected over the years. And so everything was going, and hopefully this plays. I have a couple of videos, but everything was going very well until it quickly wasn't going very well. In February of 2020, as you know, the whole world stopped and all of our projects went with it, as the idea of gathering in public space and being collaborative with other people quickly became illegal and went off the table. So we paused, we sheltered in place, we regathered, and we were thinking about what we were going to do with this new kind of normal. And we decided to picked the project back up in July 2020. But by then, everything had changed. The world had changed, America had changed, I had changed because of it. Following the murder of George Floyd, there was an ongoing passionate national conversation about race and representation. There was deep frustration about how this country treats Black and brown bodies. And this national conversation became very local. In June of 2020, on Juneteenth, numerous monuments in San Francisco were reckoned with and toppled on Juneteenth in Golden Gate Park. There was a handful of monuments throughout the park toppled, and protesters vandalized kind of monuments across the city. And shown here in this photo is Francis Scott Key and Hunabet Oseta. And that same weekend, June 2020, Juneteenth, SF officials were removing monuments in the middle of the night. This is Christopher Columbus at Coit Tower. And also at the same time, a political debacle was emerging before my eyes around the Dr. Maya Angelou monument at SF Public Library. Initially accepted, then quickly rejected in 2019, Berkeley artist Lava Thomas's proposal for the Dr. Maya Angelou monument was quickly scrapped due to its design. Apparently it wasn't traditional enough. A 2019 statement by Supervisor Catherine Stephanie, who sponsored the public art legislation, claimed that the monument didn't elevate Maya in the same way men had been elevated throughout history. She was talking about the non-figurative form of the art. And she was talking about a need for more pedestals and more bronze. And at the same time, following all this, in July of 2020, in a public meeting I attended, the SFAC, the Arts Commission, muted the Lava Thomas's speech where she was addressing the controversy, inadvertently silencing her. This caused national and local outrage. Collectives such as this one, See Black Women, popped up to stand in solidarity with Lava, and rightfully so. And finally, following all this, a week later, Mayor London Breed ordered the SF Arts Commission to create an advisory committee and a municipal study that was to evaluate the 94 monuments and their intersection with our country's racist history. So there was a ton of things going on. And at this moment, I decided that I was going to co-opt the city's municipal study and their subsequent advisory committee. So New Monuments Task Force starts here. And the project emerged out of the idea to co-opt municipal processes, but do it better and make it work for us. They had fumbled so hard until now. How could they possibly get it right, I thought. The national context also was peeping into my head. If not now, then when? Why not now? It was definitely a moment in time, and it was felt everywhere. I'm sure you felt it too. And another question, why not me? Why not a brown woman, first generational woman who had never seen a monument that looked anything like her? And for someone that researches monuments, it's kind of a huge issue to think about that I've never seen anything that like looks remotely like me or tells a story about my story. So that was a huge question for me. Why not me? And why not me, a rogue urban designer turned public artist who kind of has her feet in both of these worlds of bureaucracy and also public art. And so I had a ton of questions at this time. I was going through a lot. And even with all these questions, I knew exactly where I wanted to start with this project. I wanted to revel in being an outsider. What can't the city touch? I thought that's the space I wanted to take up. I wanted to take control of that space, the space outside the institution, to create a participatory, larger than life work about our institutional structures and how they've manifested in our public art. I think that public art offices are really good at collecting data, but what artists can do is create timely entry points for critical inquiry. Artists can create public awareness. Artists can create moments of intense reflection. I thought, if monuments are so top down, can this project be bottom up? Could I create a project that shifts power dynamics in the city a little bit? Could I create change? And for me as an artist, that's the most exciting question. Understanding our agency as artists in the city is something I'm developing day by day, but I often fall back on this quote by one of my mentors. And I highlight the last part because I think it's so central to this project. What should the questions be? I think at the time when I was developing the project and the city was also developing theirs, I was reading things about claiming the need for monetary figures, about maintenance of the monuments. What's the maintenance plan? Who has to take care of it? Is it going to be the city? Is it going to be the parks department? Or is it going to be the arts department? There was just a lot of like technical questions kind of being thrown around about what the report should cover. Also, everyone was kind of scrambling around to find the most racist monument of the collection. It was almost like a Where's Waldo for the most racist monument. And when I was reading these things, I was kind of thinking to myself, like, they're kind of missing the whole point of what the study should try to capture. I believe nobody was asking questions like, what narratives are being communicated as a whole through these art objects? What is our relationship to monuments? And how does that differ from our relationship to public art? What objects can help us to think critically? Can monuments help us to think critically? I don't have a huge history of thinking so. Can monuments engage us to see ourselves? Can monuments engage us to see the truth? So while developing all the questions associated with the work, I was also building a brain trust of artists, curators, nonprofit cultural leaders, activists. I like to think of us as outsiders, maybe something like a motley crew. And I think public art needs other eyes. Public art is a collective process. I needed an advisory committee, after all. I needed to create a task force. So I recruited fellow artists, friends, curators, mentors. I even cold called other Bay Area artists who I knew were doing the work, like Xavier Buck from the Huey P. Newton Foundation. I straight up just cold called him and asked him to be part of our initiative. And he, in the most amazing way, accepted. I was thinking to myself, who hadn't been at the table? Who would likely not be at this arts SFAC table? I wanted them to be at our table and they could sit with us. And so I led the 3-part municipal study, unofficial municipal study, and titled it The Relic Report. It was the New Monuments Task Force first initiative. Sadly, I don't think this video is going to play, but it's just a little GIF, but I'll show you I'll show you into the book shortly. So it was going to be a 3-part unofficial study. Unofficial because there was an official one and we were the unofficial one. And the first part was going to be a publication. It was going to be the presentation of the information, and it was going to introduce the main questions of the project. And it was also going to present the public comment survey, which I was using to get SF citizens involved in the project. So I drew from my background in urban design and landscape architecture and employed the typology study as the main methodology for assessment. I used categories and groupings to weigh the collection as a whole. Who were the most celebrated individuals? Why? What is their gender diversity? What's their racial diversity? What were the different design styles? What were the different materials used? Where did they come from? We ended up with 6 different groupings and categories, and this one's the first one. You can see the stark gender disparity in monuments. There's 53 monuments that commemorate the accomplishments of men, while only 3 monuments commemorate the accomplishments of women. But the funny fact is there's a lot of women on pedestals representing men, but they're not real. So there were actually a lot of representations of women to honor men. So that's a side note, but I also thought that was interesting. Our second group was OGs, 15 monuments commemorating prominent men of colonial expeditions. Third was modernish. I wanted to talk about the form of the public art, since it was such a controversy with the Lava Thomas work. What were the artworks that were in a traditional bronze and pedestal format? War and peace. We have 10 monuments celebrating war and only 2 celebrating peace. Artists and idealists. Most of the monuments in this category were gifts from other countries, and a lot of them are in Golden Gate Park. And finally, we had the category of what remains, which was monuments that were kind of hard to place. They were nothing was wrong with them. They didn't hurt anyone, nothing super offensive about them, I guess. But they were all located in places that were hard to reach. They were kind of afterthoughts in the monument kind of category. But I think it brought up the question about what our relationship to monuments are at all. And so after we released this report, we put out a public comment survey where we polled San Francisco residents to get them to respond to the report and to also create suggestions for what monuments of the future should look like. We, again, wanted to borrow the municipal process of the public comment and use it, again, for our own benefit and for our own uses, and use it to benefit us. We published a 7-question survey, and we had nearly 100 respondents to our survey. I was floored by what people submitted, taking on average half an hour to fill out detailed suggestions for the city, explaining in detail their relationship to monuments or lack thereof. To me, this signaled that the project had struck a chord. Here's just some of the examples that I've highlighted of what people submitted. And so the task force met about 3 times to curate the third part of the study, which was the second publication, Relic Report Volume 2. And it was going to be organized by the 7 survey questions that we put out, and we wanted to compile the different community responses as part of the study. We wanted to highlight creative solutions for future monuments and creative placemaking. So I'll show you what it ended up looking like. And we finished this process by coming up with 6 recommendations as a task force for either the city to follow or anyone kind of interested in this topic to follow. And during talks like this, I like to read them out loud because to me, it feels like part of the ritual when I talk about this work. And it was kind of the whole point. It was one of the most important parts of the work, was to finish with 6 recommendations for the city. And so number 1, new monuments must expand public knowledge. Number 2, new monuments must not be on the side of oppression. Number 3, new monuments must disrupt old ideas of what monuments can be. Number 4, new monuments must be dynamic and ever-changing. And number 5, new monuments must tell stories on a community level. And number 6, new monuments must challenge observers to stop and think twice. And so we were able to turn this project around in about 5 months. Just to circle back to the SFAC, they still haven't put together a report, and they had just recently put together their advisory committee. And we actually presented the report to them privately. They listened to us and they heard us. They outlined some of their process, and then they told us they outlined some of their processes to mimic our methodology. So what we did, I feel like, did work in a sense. At some point, they even recruited us to be consultants for their own advisory committee, but we weren't able to come to an agreement, and it didn't work out. But one of our task force members, Leanne Ladia, is actually on the advisory committee, so the saga continues, and we will report back when we know more. So Relic Report has kind of become our guiding document, and a lot of projects have spin out of that project. It lights the way forward for future initiatives, and even today, I still look back on the book every month or two when I'm designing new projects for clarity and guidance. There's like so much knowledge within those books that it's just one of the things that lights the way forward for us. And so I want to talk about some of the things we've done since, mostly in 2021. Shown here, we were able to project the 6 recommendations we came up with as a task force on the side of YBCA in downtown San Francisco as part of the SF Urban Film Festival. So this was out in the streets for about 3 months, and I love how the skaters were kind of interacting with it here. We also participated and partnered with an organization called 01 Art and Technology and another artist who works in new media named Camilla McGrain to create a workshop called Marble and Media Lab. And I led the workshop to support 8 emerging artists that work in new media. And we were going to cite our project back at that lovely site, the Music Concourse, where so much had taken place in 2020. Punk rock in style and kind of a guerrilla in the way that we operate. I wanted to be the first people on the ground at this like sacred site. It felt like a moment, something happened here, and I wanted to kind of unpack that through this work. And so we worked with 8 artists and Camilla McGrain's AR skills to use augmented reality to kind of reckon with these works. This is an example of one of the artists, Caleb, who wanted to reckon with Francis Scott Key, who had been toppled. And so he kind of goes through the stages of history as he sees it here. And I guess we're in the middle portion of the history, and he wanted to kind of break up the rubble from the toppled monument, assess it as more of an archaeological plate, and then reconstruct a new structure using the rubble as his kind of AR installation, which he did in a beautiful way. So you can see how the project kind of turned out. It was a AR walking tour of the different works and how the artists kind of engaged and rooted their project by monument. And I'm going to share 2 of my favorites. One is called A Speculative History by Hannah Scott, where she reckons with the Persian monument, and kind of tells a side of history that wasn't quite told and is a little darker side of history than what we know about him. And she overlaid it on the edifice, which was pretty cool. So I don't think it's going to play, unfortunately, either. Let's see. Sorry about that. I guess you can see it on our website. So she overlaid a kind of mind map of his history.
We are committed to a radically new understanding of history that engages the...
All right, I don't think it's going to work. And then we have a second one. This one is working, so that's good. So May Ross is an Indigenous artist And she wanted to reckon with a monument called the Sundial, which commemorates the 3 explorers who found California. And so she wanted to kind of layer over that monument some more indigenous knowledge. And she wanted to paint a picture of the landscape before California had been found, and kind of spotlight animals as part of her memorial, because in her culture, deities and animals are kind of honored in those ways. So she wanted to counter that in some way. This brings me to our latest initiative, which we're working on currently, called In the Future. It's an online digital zine, and we produced an open call, a international open call, where we're featuring public artists' completed works, and we want to highlight how our public art might look in the future. We had felt that New Monuments Task Force had been focusing on the past. I think it was part of 2020 and part of reckoning and the trauma of it all. But now, I think at the end of 2021, we're starting to think about what's next. What does the future look like? Who's going to tell the stories of the future is something that we've been asking ourselves, and something that we're going to spotlight through this initiative, which is going to be released in 2 months. So hopefully you guys can check it out. And so I wanted to finish on this, like, why I'm here and what I want to talk about today. What is the role of the artist in the city? From what I can tell you, what I've learned through New Monuments Task Force, and what I've learned about my role, is I can tell you that it's a very crucial role within the city. At a time of reckoning and reflection, artists have the skills to create a conversation about trauma and repair. Artists have the potential to negotiate ethics, which create more just environments. Most importantly, I think that artists can create awareness, like the Guerrilla Girls feminist poster series. I also think that artists can piece together fragmentary evidence to paint a more cohesive picture, like Forensic Architecture and their amazing project, Triple Chaser. I also think artists can create collaborative action, like Decolonize This Place and their protest guides. It's very tactile. I love them. And I also think artists can ask the right questions, like we did in San Francisco. I think that these 4 things together can create power. And if artists can create power, they can create change. And that's all I have. Thank you. Hello.
I'm muted. I'm sorry. So what I said was, oh my goodness, that was amazing. Cheyenne, that was incredible. Oh, wow. I think I told you I had found your work, and then I knew we would be having a conversation. I knew Quinn had mentioned, my colleague had mentioned, let's reach out to you for these talks. And so I didn't dig more, because I purposely wanted to be, I do this with these conversations. I don't dig too much, because I want that first reaction feeling when I'm seeing you, right? Hearing your tone and your voice and the passion that you have in the work that you're doing, which is very obvious in your presentation, not only in the way that you crafted it, but in the way that you decided to speak on it. So thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you.
There's so much there. There's so much there.
A lot happened that year, so we could talk about it.
Yeah. So congratulations on that. Congratulations on stepping out of your box and do, as you said, you kind of brought your urban design and background, became this artist and I think we say it in your bio, the self-taught artist, and went for it, and decided to maybe what I understand is that you had these questions to yourself, but you decided to share them with your community. whether that be fellow artists or people that you've admired or have been your mentors. Can you kind of speak a little bit on that process a bit more, and like how kind of that fearlessness, right? Or if it was fearless, to that first step of, because I think that is really important also. And when we think about how we as community members feel someone should be memorialized, right? What are those? So if you can speak on that, I'll be quiet so you can do that.
Um, okay, so I think that the fearlessness part, I definitely had fear in me when I was creating it. I felt very small in comparison to like this large process. I mean, San Francisco is a huge national city. I mean, it's this long-standing organization, and there's just me, this artist, that's asking these like questions that nobody wants to like deal with, And so there was definitely a lot of fear, but I think the timing of what that was, the summer of 2020, and just how much pain and trauma was in the air, gave me some kind of strength to want to take up space and also just go for it. Like it was actually the help of, and I always fall back on mentors, but one of my mentors was kind of like, you should do it, like do it now, and do it in the most crazy way you could ever think of doing it, because this is the moment to do that. And if you don't do it that way, they're just going to hijack the narrative, and you should just take up complete ownership of what you're doing and be completely unapologetic about it. And I was like, yeah, you're pretty much right. I should. And I remember that we got written about in a bunch of things as part of the process, but then we got this KQED article, and I remember feeling so sick the day before I knew it was going to be published, because it was pretty much just outlining the fact that we're going to co-opt this municipal study, and we're just going to do it better, and we've assembled all these artists and activists, and like it's going to be like completely punk rock. And I like working in that way, where I feel like the project New Monuments Task Force is like my punk rock, hardcore, don't give a F kind of like creative child, where I feel like that is outside of me as an artist. Like I'm managing it, and I understand what the voice is, but I think creating the project as this fictional municipal agency also gave me the strength, because it wasn't like Cheyenne Concepcion taking on the monuments of San Francisco, and I wanted to share the responsibility with other artists, because I think it's an important part of the work. And I had, at the time, they didn't like really announce what they were going to do, but I just was like, someone is going to be writing this report in a dark room, and then they're going to come out, and it's going to be dry as hell, and then it's going to give us a checklist of how to deal with all the monuments. And so I was like, what could I do that's the exact opposite of what they would do? And just start there, like get your friends together, get some radical artists together, cold call people, make waves. Like that was pretty much we kind of came in hot, and it was part of the plan. And I don't have a recipe for fearlessness, unfortunately, that I can share, but it was a reaction to a moment in history. And I feel like 2020 is going to be bigger than the 60s was, I think, for art and how we interpret the world and how we see things. And it was just a visceral, emotional, artistic like reaction to it in my most vulnerable way. And luckily it was received well, and the respondents, the hundreds of people that responded, was like, I couldn't believe that happened, And so yeah, it was an amazing experience. I don't know if I answered your question, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, because I think as it kind of speaks on this thought. I was talking to somebody about this, about what being an artist is yesterday, and I said, I think so many young people, or just people who are coming new to the art world, to art as a form of work, they don't know how to call themselves an artist, right? There's like this fear
Gosh.
there, right? And so I think you speaking on that, did that is it's a step you take, right? And sometimes it involves a community altogether to kind of help push you that way, right? And you
Yeah.
shared your community with us. You just showed the people that you either reached out to on your own, or you already knew. Like, I recognize Shamshir. I know Shamshir from previous work, so it was great to see him
Cool.
from 01.
Yeah.
And just to see that diversity of people, I think it seems as though you were very mindful about who you decided to work with. And when you think about what you're doing with this your own type of rogue municipal study, and then you put it next to a municipal study, and you said it in your conversation, they're taking a longer process, and you
Mhm.
all got it done in months, what you were able to do.
Yeah.
So for me, what I think about is, often cities or municipalities have these issue of gathering as much community input as possible,
Mhm.
because if they don't, then look what happens, right? The Maya Angelou, that
Mhm.
that whole project just exploded, right?
Yeah.
Instead, they decided to make decisions on them for themselves.
Yeah.
And I was following that when it was happening, as well as many other of my colleagues and co-art lovers were following that
Yeah.
unfortunate story. But I think how did you go about bringing that team together, one, and then also if you can speak a little bit of like, did they have to be from San Francisco, or could they be in Oakland, or could they be in the Greater Bay Area? We're in
Yeah.
San Jose.
Yeah.
We're in the Santa Clara County. We consider ourselves part of the South Bay, right? We are the South Bay. We're part of the Bay Area. So, how did you move forward without excluding anybody? Um, and then also, how did you get this survey out to people? How were you able to engage community members in this public art project, really, that you
Yeah.
were working on?
Right. So when putting the team together, that was a huge first step. And it wasn't only, there was one person not from the Bay Area, which is Paul Farber, but he's a dear mentor of mine. And so he was like one of the people I was having conversations about, like, do you know what's happening here? Kind of like, it's kind of crazy, right? And so he very graciously accepted to be part of it, even though not being from the Bay Area. But I think he knows enough about monuments to kind of participate in it. But so other than that, it was not just SF. We had 2 task force members from Oakland, actually, and but mostly SF. And I I started it. Well, I have a co-director. Her name's Annalisa Escobedo. She's a friend of mine who's also an artist. But we were having early conversations about her. I wanted her to get her involved, and this kind of spun out into other conversations about who we should get involved, which actually kind of led into our strategy. We wanted to partner with organizations that have like rooted ties to their communities. So, for example, we wanted one person that I had never worked with her before. She's another person I cold called. Her name is Deanna Ruiz, and she runs this organization called People Power Media, which is kind of a community media project. And she has a huge network. So I wanted to, it was strategic. The artist that I kind of cold called, reached out to, if you were doing your own project in your own space, similar to Cultural Memory, which she was. I reached out to her. I reached out to Huey P. Newton because they were building their own monument in Oakland, and they had to go through the whole process of raising money and like getting they were doing it for themselves, and they didn't wait for the city, and they just like decided to raise money themselves and do it by themselves. So I loved what they were doing because of that. And in terms of other organizations, because it was a monument lab, Goethe Institute project, they were able to connect me with people they had worked with who kind of do similar public artworks. And so it was all very pretty strategic. And I thought hard about who I wanted at the table. I think the public side of it, I kind of wanted to weigh more on community-based organizations because I felt like they would understand why it needed to be done in a very bottom-up way. And so that was our strategy for building a team. And in terms of getting the survey out, we used social media and to push our online survey. But a conversation that had come up at a task force meeting was who your population is and how you get to them. And so we did a mailer survey. So we had a mailing campaign and like made a bunch of postcards, and then with like a return stamp on it. And so we just like found addresses online and just mailed like hundreds out. It wasn't super strategic. Like it was kind of like 50 addresses in this neighborhood, 50 addresses and it was just like citizen of San Francisco who it was addressed to, you know?
Yeah.
And so, but the mailer actually wasn't as successful as our online survey. I think like 80% of people did it online, which kind of says, and reflecting back on it, it shows that our audience was probably much younger, people who saw it on social media or had read an article about it and things like that. So, but actually, I've had a conversation on another panel about using like social media and technology to kind of actually promote your public art in an easier way. And I think it is actually better than before COVID. We would always do kind of events, right, where you invite people and then the activation happens and it's very like curated. But I feel like now, and especially at that time, everything was virtual. So we would put a lot of emphasis on using social media and building a campaign and kind of like, typical like brand strategies where you're kind of DMing people and you're sending your flyer everywhere. And so that's how we got the word out, and we hustled really hard on doing that. And I had everyone share it with, like, being part of the task force meant you had to share it with like 5 people you knew or something, that was just like a rule. And then so that quickly became like 50 people, so it was just all really grassroots and ended up working for us, even though maybe that part wasn't totally planned. But yeah.
Well, it sounds like it was successful, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you got people to respond to it. So
yeah, from what I've heard, and I'm not an expert on this, but I don't think, typically cities even get that many responses to things like this. So I think we were happy with the number of responses, but also the quality of responses too, because we did it online, we were able to see more data about it, and people would spend on at least 30 minutes to an hour just like going really in depth about what they think the future of monuments should be, if some monument hurt them, what their trauma is, like what they really feel about public art. And we focused on qualitative data. I should say this as well, because I thought the city's really good at collecting data. Are you male or female? Are you like 21 or 31? And I wanted to focus on qualitative data because I felt like these are the deeper questions that are harder to create reports about. It's very personal and very subjective, but also kind of the most interesting questions. And so I think that's why it's so rich in content, was because it's so personal. It wasn't like a written report about 30 concrete monuments or whatever. It was very personal and very heartfelt, and I think that's why it was so successful.
Yeah, when it comes to qualitative versus quantitative in regards to this kind of data, I can see why a city would want, the quantitative, but I think that it would be beneficial for cities that are are working with public art or artists to get, to work with you, to work with groups like yourselves. It sounds like it's not moving forward. I mean, you mentioned that, there wasn't an agreement, but
And
I
I wish
think,
them the best.
of
No
course, right?
no
Yeah,
hard feelings.
yeah, right, yeah, of course. So, but those are the ways that when you talk about how public art might look like in the future, it's also like, how can artists work with cities in the future,
Yeah,
right? And
totally.
so, and when we say artists, like, I don't create art, but I consider myself somebody that works in the arts because
Yeah,
of the work that I get to do, in public art plans, and the people I work with. And so, we have a passion that we want to help the cities that we live in or that we visit, and our quality, right, the quality that we come from conversation that comes out of the conversations we have, can be used by cities. They don't have to have their hourly or salary workers working on that part if that's a part that's taking a bit too long for them, right?
yeah.
So those are things I think about, and it sounds like you did it, but it was not. It didn't. They didn't take it. They didn't.
Well, they did change their study to be more participatory. Like, I don't think they were planning to do like a lot of public engagement at first. And now, from what I've read, they are programming in like 3 meetings, which is kind of like a typical meeting, city meeting about where they want to make it very transparent as they make their report, which I think is a good thing. So, they saw what we did, and I think they know that we created knowledge that wasn't there prior. So I think it is valuable, and it's free, and they can copy it as much as they want, because I think that that's the point, is like to create the new narrative, the new way of doing things. And I hope I've been thinking about this artist in the city, and it's kind of like a big title for this talk, but it's something I want to kind of keep saying over and over again, because I feel like there is value, and I feel like the more you say it, someone is going to see it eventually, and then they're gonna be like, yeah, you're right. They do ask the right questions. They are engaged citizens. They do community projects. They're the ones walking around your neighborhood every day doing the things that are looking ahead. And so I just want to keep saying it in spaces like this, because I think there is a role, and I'm not the only artist making change in their city. I know a lot who are doing things in LA that have taken agency and are actively working with their public art offices. I don't know. I feel like I wish the SF Arts office was a little more transparent and would work with artists in this capacity more. Because I've actually heard of other cities who are super willing to do it, and I've been on, the other side, seeing how things are done in other cities, and they actually do invite people like me or you into the room more often than I think it happens in San Francisco.
Yeah, I agree. I do know about other cities, and my colleagues have been a part of those projects as well. So I think it's our job as people who live and work in the cities that we do, to continue to attend those meetings, right, and be present. I kind of want to switch to something, another part of this conversation, and it was you spoke on it a little bit recently about having an online survey and having a paper survey. So that kind of speaks also to having like a physical public artwork or monument, and having sorry, my chair is loud, having the AR experience, right? And so as we think about the future of when we recognize people who've made significant contributions, or the way people engage with public art, do you see that being the way, having this like AR experience? And how did the community members engage? And would you say that was an successful engagement opportunity between the public art and see? And I even have I got this weird feeling saying public art because it's AR, so you can't touch it. And I'm always thinking about the ability to touch. And then between the the public art and the observer?
Yeah. So I think AR, well, I think the trend there's an obvious trend towards it because I think we engage with the world around us every day using our phones, and it happens to be now a way to kind of wayfind. You see it being used in cities as like a way to wayfind, or kind of recently some more historical kind of tours on your phone kind of thing, like almost like a museum exhibition. And so I think that the idea to do the AR kind of came out of the fact that I wanted to do something at the music concourse very quickly, because I think agility and being fast and being able to do something like really quick is part of our strength, and it's part of the attitude of the project. And so I wanted to keep building momentum and do something really quickly, because I knew that that site at Music Concourse was so rich and so much had happened there. And it was between these two museums, and it's highly trafficked, and there's just something I needed to do there. And so it was actually Shamsher, and he was like, so what do you want to do? Let's do something. I was like, I know where I want to do it, but like, can we? So it was actually a collective conversation between Shamsher and I. I didn't know much about AR until he brought it to my attention, which is why we brought in the artist Camilla, who's amazing and I think she has like the biggest AR mural in the world right now in Vegas. And so she's really skilled, and she definitely brought the tool set. But I think New Monuments Task Force brought the concept, which was to kind of activate the space. And since we had so much success with, not so much, but more success with our kind of online presence and getting people to participate in our work using social media and also our online survey. And then also, I don't know, I had seen it happening in other cities in a real like kind of not radical way, I would say, nothing protesty, but I felt like it was a moment and we had to act very quickly. And I think AR, it was nice because we weren't going to get a permit, and those take 2 years to get. So we weren't going to get a permit, and we wanted to be punk rock, and we wanted to do something fast. And so it made sense. And I think that it was also hard because it had never been done before. And so even the technological side was difficult, because you had to point your phone at the monument, and then it had to recognize it and then produce the art. And so I don't think anyone has ever done it before. So we were kind of trying to do it, being the first people to have ever done it. And so there was a lot of difficulty in that. And to me, I think it's cool because the project I want to do inventive things. I'm thinking about the future. We're talking about new monuments, right? Yeah. And so I thought it was a great workshop. I thought the artists, they came out with amazing tools, and I actually still continue to use them. The public art part, the walking tour part, was a little difficult because the program we were using, which was called Adobe Aero, it's in beta, so it's not even like a real program yet. And so there was a lot of technical difficulties with people being able to recognize it on their phone, or they didn't have enough like self connection to load the work, which was like a lot of megabytes or whatever. So there was technical things like that weren't so great. But I think that we were able to present it online, and you can kind of see it on 01's website of all of them together. And then we did an online talk and let the artists kind of present their work, and had a lot of really good comments and feedback from that. So so that was one part of the thing that I liked. But another thing was that we had a pretty good budget. And one thing I wanted to try with this project was to kind of filter some of the budget back into the community, because I wanted to spotlight emerging artists. We're using this new technology. And like, I felt like I wanted to create space for that create space to just mess up and try things and be weird and like, let's just go for it. And I was really trying to put emphasis on the experience as a whole versus just like the final tour. But as you saw, like people, the two ones I showed, which maybe you didn't see very well because of the video, but I think people did amazing work out of it. I was actually pretty impressed by being able to learn a whole new language of like coding something and like putting it into the world. So
yeah, I'm curious to go back and look at those YouTube videos. I'm definitely going to check that out. So thank you for sharing that. That's something that we're thinking about as a possibility for the way women are going to be, the women of Santa Clara County can be recognized as an, is that an option? Does that make sense? And it's not just because of where we live in Silicon Valley, but also, as you said, as you mentioned, what is the future of public art? What is the future of space, of public space?
Yeah.
And when we think about monuments, too often it's been instilled in our thoughts and our brains of something that is hard, something rigid, something that looks like a man. Even if it's a woman, it looks like a man. Yeah, things like that. And what do those futures look like? And so I appreciate you mentioning that and talking about that part of the project, because I think that we as human beings, as people of our society, we can get stuck in that one way of thinking. And even with what 2020 brought us, there's still that thought process. And so the more we have conversations like this, the more we get people to really think outside of the box, and the way that public art and the way people can be recognized can change. And it is going to change.
Right.
Just like everything else. So appreciate that. And I guess I want to, we have a few minutes left, and I would love to hear your thoughts on the way you would like to see women be recognized. I mean, you spoke on some of the women. I wrote down the modernism and the war and peace and the artists and idealists and all those, and what remains, and there wasn't very many women that were mentioned, and those are just the ones you found. I'm sure there were probably some that have popped up since finding the list of monuments and creating that list of monuments that are in the city. Maybe you can speak on, as an artist, or what you heard other people say throughout this multi-year project now, because we're in 2020 going into 2022, the way they would like to see women recognized.
This is such a good question, and something I think about actually a lot lately, because I feel like there's so much responsibility now to get it right, at least from my perspective. And I didn't I'm going to talk about a recent project I did, because it kind of explores this a little bit. I didn't show it at all, but I recently was able to contribute to a group project called Monument is Living Memory. And I wanted to create a sculpture that honored my grandmother, because she was an amazing woman. She's still around. Wait, she's an amazing woman. And so what I wanted to do with that, though, and this is a comment that came, one of the most beautiful comments I'm actually from the Relic report, was that there was someone who was very passionate, and a single mother responded to the survey, and she's like, I want a monument to surviving, to paying my bills, to like getting through my life, even though nothing has ever been in my favor, kind of thing, And so that stuck with me, and this idea of wanting to just honor the day-to-day. I feel like monuments, they're always this triumphant narrative, and it like skews history in a direction of us like winning this war or whatever. And this idea of triumph is so present in monuments of America. Like there's no monuments to the wars we've lost, It's only our triumphs, it's only our achievements. And I think the monuments of the future, especially for women, I want to honor the triumphs of women and the triumphs of their achievements, even though they're not on this stage of the world stage. The monument I made to my grandmother, I wanted it to honor her triumph, because she emigrated here, had no support, and she's just an amazing person, and also has the sweetest personality. Even though life tried to harden her, she's still extremely adventurous, like world traveler, kind of like totally living life on her own terms. And that to me is like such a triumph that I wanted to honor. And I think that these personal narratives, these personal moments are the things that we should start spotlighting in the future, because that's what we don't see. You know, people want to see monuments to their third grade teacher, to someone who was kind to them, to like to women in science, and monuments to artists and things like that. And I think that the future of monuments should be more humble. I think they should tell stories on a personal level. I think they should be softer. Like I have this kind of obsession with soft right now, because I feel like this material has been so hard, it's so permanent. This idea of not being permanent is also something I'm thinking about. Like, do monuments have to be permanent in the future? I'm wondering, like, it's something I wonder about all the time, because what a lot of the comments we got back, which I think is a really great comment, and a lot of people said this, was like, why can't we just switch them out like every 30 years or
And
something?
do they have to be a statue? Like, can they be a park?
Exactly.
Can they be a park? Can they be a, I don't know, something like
A mound, or
Mhm.
like a mound of, I know an artist in Chicago doing that. He's doing like these earth mounds, monuments, which I love, because you wouldn't even think they are a monument, you know what I mean? And so I'm thinking about that. I feel like we're really like rewriting this definition as we speak, and it's exciting to be in this space right now, because it's such a big, like, we've only known monuments as a certain way for hundreds of years, like thousands even, you know.
Mhm.
And we're really like, that's why I think 2020 is so moving, because we're really at this moment redefining it. I think I'm not the only person who has this loose definition of monument. People have asked me, other public art agencies have asked me, what is your definition of monument? And I always turn it back around. I'm like, what's your definition of monument? Because I feel like no one, it's like such a loose term everyone is trying to figure out right now.
Yeah.
And that's exciting, right? And I think definitely more monuments to women in the future, by women as well, for women, by women, and impermanent, soft, ephemeral, delicate, just like women.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I think that's all something that can be done. And as you
Yeah.
said, there's so many people that are thinking about that. I mean, Monument Lab in itself, for those who are watching, don't know about Monument Lab, please Google that. Please search that group. And there's amazing artists and creators that are doing work with them even now, right? And so Cheyenne is part of that group, as we said. And we are all thinking about the way our world is changing, and this is one of them, and this is an important one.
Yeah.
It is the way that we our monuments and the way we recognize people are basically I see them as uh, the books, but that we walk by or we experience in an active way, right? It's history. It's not only history from many years ago, but maybe history from very recent 2020. You know what I mean? Things of that
Right.
sort. So we're constantly learning, and I think with what you're doing, the way that it's kind of this transition from tactile, physical to this blend of that and online, whether it's the online zine or it's the AR or that
Yeah.
is, that is the way to our future. And I think what you're asking, the question of what is the role of the artist in the city, I think we all need to remember that as we think about the way our cities work and the way we want people to be recognized, because artists and people who work in the arts administrators, we have something to say right? We usually do, and we are always willing to bring our perspective in some way or another. So I want to thank you, Cheyenne, so much for spending this hour with us. It's been fantastic, and I've been looking forward to this conversation. So I appreciate you and all that you're doing, and I cannot wait to continue to watch what you're going to continue to do with
Yeah.
Monument Lab and so much other of your projects. We're going to have to go and follow Monument. What is the one you were just saying about your grandmother? I wrote it down. So
Oh,
Monument is living memory.
yeah. That's at YBCA. It just came down actually, but you could see it. You could see it on my
Okay.
website. Well,
Okay.
there will be more, and we will cross paths again. So thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for having me.
Great. Well, I want to take this moment to thank everybody for joining the conversation today. If you caught it at the end, you can always go to our YouTube page, Womanhood, and watch this conversation with Cheyenne and her presentation, but also have the opportunity to watch our past conversations with artists such as Judy Baca and Rennie Young and other amazing women artists of that have created work here in California and beyond. So thank you for that. I also want to remind everybody to visit the womanhoodproject.org page to participate in this multi-year project we are doing, where we are going to be recognizing women's contributions to Santa Clara County. So you go there, nominate a woman, nominate your teacher, nominate your auntie, nominate your neighbor, somebody who you admire. And we want to learn about those people, those incredible women, and share them with us. So thank you again. You can go to www.womanhoodproject.org or visit us at courbanize.co /womanhood, where you can identify locations of public art, and visit us on social media, Womanhood. We are so happy, and thank you. And everybody, please enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you so much. Bye.